Meeting. I do not believe there's any public comments. Is that correct, Mike? Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll actually move to our Pledge of Allegiance to start the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I believe our first presentation for our Finance Committee meeting is our audit presentation, and I believe Myers, Patsy and Associates are here to present. So go ahead.
Thank you. To introduce myself again, my name is Kimberly Wetzel. I am the partner in charge of the audit for the school year for June 30, 2024. As part of the audit, we have to develop a risk assessment. And I touch on this each year. Where do we see additional risk, which doesn't mean anything negative, but it would drive our audit procedures and the audit programs that we decide to focus additional attention on. So we continue to assess elevated risk for federal programs compliance, payroll transactions, including retirement, and also for pensions and other post-employment benefit obligations. And then the standard setters assume there's a presumption that improper revenue recognition and management override of controls are risks that are should be included in that overall risk assessment. We would also identify other risks. The ones that we're required to report to you are those that we think are higher level. So the results of our audit, first, we give an opinion on the financial statements. Our opinion is a clean opinion, which is the same as saying unmodified. And also in the opinion letter, the financial statements includes a report on supplementary information, which is also unmodified. The supplementary information included in the audit of the financial statements is the schedule of federal awards. As part of that reporting, we also have under Yellow Book a report on internal control over financial reporting. No material weaknesses were identified and no reported significant deficiencies. There were no findings of non-compliance material to the financial statements under the Yellow Book report. And then the third report that's included with the audit is the report on federal and major programs. The program that was selected for this year was the Child Nutrition Program. And so in this year, you may have expected the Education Stabilization Funds, or ESSER, to be included as a major program. This was the first year that they were removed as being required as high risk. So under the uniform guidance and the selection of programs, this would bring back into that calculation other programs that are type A over $750,000. You can go to the next slide. So some trend information. This is the consolidated or condensed statement of net position for governmental activities. Most notably, you can see that the two bond issues that were put out for new capital funding are increasing your cash and investment balance for this year end, and then also an increase in bonds net of premiums. The total bond issue with premiums is approximately $30 million. Other than that, there's slight changes between net OPEB liabilities, pension liabilities. Those, again, are actuarially driven. The performance on PSERS for 22-23, which is it's a year behind for financial reporting for the school district, was generally positive. except for some governmental like fixed income investments. But those get amortized out. I think the return on investments for PESers was around 3.5% in their annual report that they published for that time period. So this is also a 5-year trend schedule for business type activities, which is the food service fund. For the most part, it's consistent with prior years, only some small fluctuations. A new item for the current year would be the subscriptions payable. This was a new POS system that was purchased during the year. And that falls under a standard that was required to be implemented 1 year prior. So it's not a new standard, it's 1 year old, for valuing long-term subscriptions similar to the lease accounting. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So some trend information for the general fund. Total general fund revenues, $150 million. That's an increase of approximately $4 million over the prior year. The composition of that is primarily in your local revenues, and it is increases in investment earnings, and then also some fluctuations relating to federal and state revenues that are covered in a little more detail on some budgetary slides that I have ahead of us. On the expenditures, relatively consistent to the prior year, going up to 130.8 million from 130 million. And both of these years are significantly increased from regular general fund expenditures due to ESSER spending in those years. So anticipate a decrease or a drop off from federal spending for 24-25. Proceeds from long-term debt, these are iPads that follow under GASB 87 for lease accounting. So there's typically a new scheduled rotation allotment of iPads each year for the school district. But the one item that sticks out from other years is your transfers out. So primarily, historically, the transfers out are your debt service requirement to your debt service fund. In addition to those transfers in 23-24, there were transfers to the capital reserve fund made from assigned fund balance, and that were partially included in your general fund budget. Coming down to the bottom, the change in fund balance net overall is approximately break even, including those transfers.
Could you remind us what the restatement item in 24 and 22 is?
So the restatement that we made for this year was a recalculation of the cash flow streams on the cell tower lease. So there was some escalation clauses in there of when they were going to be, there was increases in 5-year increments, and there was a calculation error. So the restatement is just to,
Calculation error?
yeah.
Okay, on the part of Verizon?
No, just in discounting the cash flows for financial statement presentation.
Okay, thank you.
And our opinion is not modified with respect to the correction. There's no modification of the audit opinion with
I
respect to the
understand
correction.
that. You said that at the beginning. I'm just
Okay.
asking what the item is.
That is the item. And some historical trend information. This is the food service fund in a modified format from what is presented in the financial statements. Operating revenues are decreased from 1.5 to 8. This is made up by federal revenues under the community eligibility provision for a school lunch program. And there was also additional revenue under state for the breakfast initiative. In total, revenues in the food service fund slightly lower than the year prior to 4.5 million from 4.7. In 22-23, lunch and breakfast were still being served under the seamless summer option as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. Total expenditures for the food service fund were $4.4 million or $4.5 million for last year. Most significantly, the increase here is in supplies. And so this is just part of inflation for the most part on that line. And then also, regular increases under salary and benefits. The ending net position is a deficit of $935,000. So to provide a little bit more detail on the budgetary performance for the general fund, for revenues and other financing sources, total revenues were $150.6 million, and the budget variance here is $7.8 million. Most notably, earnings on investment. So the investment earnings in the general fund was $3.1 million positive variance. And then this is due mostly to higher yields on deposit accounts. I think this was started to be realized in the previous year, about halfway through. So additional higher deposit yields from almost 0 to close to 5% occurred halfway through 22-23, so an entire year. State subsidies, a lot of school districts, including Hempfield, didn't have the entire state budget and the appropriations that would be made for basic education. And in the end, those came out higher. So there's a budget variance there, approximately $1.9 million from the original budget. And last, federal subsidies are showing a $2.5 million budget surplus, and then total were $4.7 million. The difference being, are you budgeting the entire amount of what you will be spending under ESSER? It's a multi-year program. Any variance to the positive on the revenue side would have a similar negative variance on the expenditure side since they will be matching. And then, which you'll see on the next slide, the debt proceeds, there was $478,000 to the positive to show the inception of the lease for the iPads. And there's a mirroring $478,000 negative on the expense side to report the lease transaction. Total expenditures were $130.8 million or 0.7 and show a $1.3 deficit. But we just explained $2.5 million as federal programs and $500,000 relates to the lease proceeds. So beyond that, there are some surpluses contained within the expenditures, excuse me. So this is offset. I think the largest areas you can see support services, $2.1 million. And most of that was under operations and maintenance. Now there were a number of repairs and maintenance contracts and other items that were paid out of the capital reserve fund. The ending fund balance was $30.3 million. So just as a quick snapshot overall, we're showing revenues at $150.6 million, total expenditures $130.8 million, and the excess of revenues over expenditures was $19.9 million. Of that amount, that was used to fund debt service transfers and transfers to the capital reserve fund, leaving a net change in fund balance of approximately $132,000 or close to break even. The school district's internal service fund is used to provide medical and dental claims for employees and retirees. There is a charge similar to an insurance company for a premium that is made to other funds, the general fund and the food service fund. And those are shown first. So the charges to other funds for those insurance premiums, there's $12.3 million. There are also payroll deductions or retiree payments or COBRA payments that are received. They totaled $1.2 million. Other income within the fund was $143,000. Expenses include medical claims, and other costs include insurance for stop loss and also administrative fees. Total expenses for the internal service fund were $13,833,000, and the net change in position, a change in net position was a decrease of $250,000. So this came in very close. And there was enough available within that fund to continue to let the net position roll to the next year. Beginning net position was 2.3 and ending net position is 2 million. That shouldn't say deficit there, but
What was the 143 in other income? Was that just interest income?
there's some rebates that are received and some other income that relates to incentives from, it could be prescription or other items. Some receipts are net against medical claims. So it's those types of items.
So,
And there's also interest income in there.
okay, so there wasn't some interest income. as well.
About half.
Okay, because that seems low, given. Wait, what's the balance on the fund?
About $2 million.
What is it?
2 million.
Very bottom.
2 million, okay,
Right.
all right, that makes more sense, okay. Thank you.
Pending standards, we went over this the last couple years, but it is effective for the current fiscal year. The GASB change in compensated absence calculations and reporting. There's some other standards that they've issued, but this is the one that is have the largest financial impact on the financial statements. And so I would take any questions if there were any more. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is item 3B, and that's the contracts. There really is, I believe, only one contract here, and it's for the orchestra. And it is a new contract, and it will be on the agenda for approval on January 14th. Does anybody have any questions about this contract? It's with the Eden Resort. Here.
Is this just for the orchestra?
It's just for the orchestra. It's a total of $1,000. It's being paid for by the families of the orchestra.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, you will see that on the agenda January 14th for approval in the finance section. And then we'll move on to financial action items. We have items B through F for approval. So I'm looking for a motion for approval for financial action items B through, I'm sorry, say F? Yeah, through F. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Donato and a second
That's fine.
from Mr. Maris. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Take a vote. Those in favor? All right, that's 8-0. Is Mr. Wagner online? He's not? Okay. And then, any opposed? There's none, so we're good. All right. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda for finance unless anybody has anything. I believe we're ready to move to buildings and grounds. Is that correct? All right. I'll
So-
turn it over to Mr. Maris.
Buildings and grounds, we have a total of one item to review. Mrs. James has that for scoreboard update.
Yes, so I'm here to give you an update on the scoreboard for the baseball, varsity baseball. And we put out an RFP for the varsity baseball and softball, varsity softball field replacement scoreboards for the failing scoreboard for varsity baseball. When the RFP was returned, the first time we had one bidder. So we put that back out to RFP again. The second time it was returned, we had no bidders. So at this point, I am working with ELA. ELA developed the RFP for the scoreboards. And so I'm working with them to determine other alternatives in this process for replacement of scoreboards. In this process, since the scoreboard or since the RFPs were developed, we have also found that with the processes that have begun for the high school, the varsity baseball field, as we had talked about and suspected before, is going to need to be moved. And so that is determined that that will happen. We will have 2 more seasons of baseball at the current location. And then it will be moved once that, after the second year of baseball, that will be moved, and the construction will begin that summer, will be completed that summer, and it will have several months until the next season to be rested and waiting for grass to grow and that sort of thing.
Whenever we get this new scoreboard, it will be movable. Can it be moved from?
That is the
oh,
plan.
okay.
Yes, that is the plan.
Why? Just curious why there's no bidders. Is it highly specialized? There's not a lot of interest, not a lot of profit, or what? Do we have any idea why we got none?
There's speculation. We don't have any definite, one of the members from ELA has been in contact with some of the scoreboard companies, finding out if they're going to bid. There were several companies that took the packet and never did anything with it, never sent in a bid. So he's been in contact with them, but we haven't gotten any definitive answers from them as to why. We're surmising that it has something to do with timing. We did request, particularly because of the new season coming for baseball and not having a scoreboard. We requested that this process be done by March, beginning of March, so that they do have a scoreboard for the season. Whether or not that had played a part in it, we're speculating that maybe it did, because they would be having to do this over the next few months. Was that an issue? I think possibly some of the issue may have also been the size of the scoreboard that we were doing. The pylons that are existing, we don't really have any background on how those pylons were installed. So none of the companies would install the new scoreboard on the existing pylons because they don't know how those were installed. They don't know if they can handle the weight and the wind. So we're assuming that there were issues with that as well.
It just seems odd to me that we haven't received any more than one bid on that. And I have to be honest, is this the same, and I'm just gonna ask this question because I don't know the way to do it. Is this the same group that did that put the RFP out for the removal of those tanks?
Yeah.
Different group,
Mhm.
okay. All right.
Yep.
And the other thing I was gonna suggest is if there is such thing as a mobile scoreboard
That's
that could be used, that's appropriate, large enough, and not compromising anything for the young men and women that are playing on those fields, I would suggest, being that we're going into a building project and maybe looking at the stadium and other things, maybe we wrap that into something else that'll make it a little more attractive, and then the timeline would also be a little more attractive if it wasn't rushed and had to be done before the spring season.
Right. I've posed that question myself at this point, and I don't have any answers for you. So I don't want to comment on it since I don't have any
okay.
answers.
At least we're exploring it. And I think it would pay to look at that RFP too. I can't say because I haven't seen it, but I just wonder, is there something in there that maybe was worded that's scaring somebody and that we need to just look at? I want to be transparent with the RFP and what we need, but I also sometimes just certain little things in there can scare somebody away from even bidding it or even asking about it.
Agreed.
So at this point, ELA is trying to figure out what may have scared them and
Right.
try
and
to get
I've
some successful bids.
I've posed some other questions and they're trying to get those answers for me and so that we can better make a decision.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm just curious, how much do you estimate this will cost? I don't remember, I don't recall hearing.
Do we have a ballpark idea?
Yeah,
New pylons for the scoreboard could be about $20,000.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought we were just
think-
getting, never mind,
I
go.
think the scoreboard was 20, that's for the base. Okay.
It's probably more like, I want to say it was like 35,000 because 25 was without the pitch count and some of the other things. That was just the core. Because we were looking at other options to get this done sooner with the existing piers. So we're still trying to work through a solution for this, for the spring.
So you, like $20,000 to $40,000 approximately?
For the board, yes.
Yeah. And then we have to have an
board.
right. And then we have to have an install as well.
And
So probably 50 to 75,
Right,
it's
and-
all said and
I
done.
mean, we're also getting some sponsorship funds from OAL for the scoreboard. That's going to offset some of that as well. So we're just working through all of those pieces.
But is there a reason why we don't get a smaller school board that we would have to change the pylons? Because a pylon, that's $20,000 a small, because that's gonna move. So is there a reason why we can't downsize to fit the weight?
But it wouldn't, if we would downsize it, then it wouldn't be what they were originally looking for in a scoreboard. It would be a very minimalistic scoreboard. And not what they would want
The league would want.
to use for the new field and so
Right.
forth.
Yeah, but
So then what do we do with that scoreboard?
I'm thinking like if you get a used scoreboard or a smaller scoreboard, I don't know, I just think that we're trying to fit on bigger pylons, right? That's wasted money. Period.
Absolutely. And that's why,
If you
that's
get
why we
a
don't want to.
Scoreboard, you could resell it or keep for backup or whatever, if it fits in that pylon, like that would be wasted.
The other part of that is the companies that would have to install the new scoreboard are not willing to do that on the existing pylons because they would be signing off that those pylons are suitable in the, how far down they go, and they would be suitable for the weight where they don't want to do that.
What did
There's
we
some
do?
other options around that. I think we could have those pylons evaluated and we could sign a waiver if we need to. There's some other things we can do around that. I have a hard time believing that those pylons won't hold a new scoreboard. Most of the new scoreboards are lighter than the older scoreboards ever were. So, I mean, I'm no engineer, but common sense would tell me that there's some other options there. Maybe we put some reinforcement bars at the bottom of it to hold it, make it so it doesn't blow over, rather than just jump right into a replacement of them. But I don't necessarily support getting a tiny scoreboard where everyone needs binoculars to see it. Then we might as well not have one.
What did we do last year? Did we have a scoreboard? It didn't work.
We did not have a working scoreboard last year. And then when we came to a playoff game, we had to rent a scoreboard.
Was that pretty expensive?
Yes,
So-
that particular one was.
So leasing wouldn't be a reasonable option.
Well, for that particular scoreboard, we could look into, and which is why I question now, can we look into other possibilities for renting scoreboards for each of those 2 seasons?
Because of the building project, why stick too much into it? So maybe lease something
Correct,
if it's
yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah, I think if you can come out ahead with leasing for those 2 years to get things along until the building project is nailed down, there's no sense spending money on install and new piers. if we
And then
can-
also having to move them too. We'd
Yeah,
have to pay to
and
have
it's a
them
whole
moved.
nother- And new piers.
Right.
How much was the leasing? And what was?
I
the-
don't know. That's
the
what
one?
that's what I posed the question
Mhm.
today to ELA. Is that an option? And so he's checking into that for me.
I have to say, I'm just kind of dumbfounded by the price because I'm thinking,
No.
I don't remember when we bought the football field. Changed that scoreboard. I don't remember what year we did that. That was like 95,000.
Video almost in excess of 100,000.
Okay. Where did I get 95? Anyway. It just doesn't seem, I don't know. I guess it's apples and oranges. Yeah.
All right, any other comments? Thank you, Mr. James. The only other thing is to talk about the calendar. Our next meeting will be January 28th, Buildings and Grounds and Finance. And if there's no further discussion, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, do we? Second? Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.